Welcome to the season finale and the 49th original episode recorded of Third Song In. Unfortunately, my co-host Chris Derrickson cannot be here for this very auspicious recording. In his place, I have booked the cutest guest ever, also the most patient, accommodating, and helpful, my wife, Dawn Polacek, who agreed to be a guest at the very last minute. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I think it's very ironic since I am not a podcast person.
Well, you're going to be one after this, I guarantee. So, this may be the first episode you've ever listened to, as far as I know.
Hey, I've listened to lots of them
I'm just kidding.
over and over as you edit them.
Yeah, that's true. Dawn Polacek is the director of sales on-premise transatlantic division. Is that right? Division?
Yep.
Did I say division?
Yep.
With a multinational company called Southern Glazer Wine and Spirits. She's been working in the liquor industry for something like 25 years, maybe more.
Probably.
She knows her spirits, I can tell you that. And someday she's going to come back as a guest and we're going to talk about the liquor business. But I really feel like I need Chris here for that one. So this time around, we're going to talk about the fact that she also attended Washington University in St. Louis, as did about 75% of all of our guests. She played volleyball for the Washington University Bears, and she is a member of the very first national championship team from Washington University. Any sport, any gender, WashU volleyball in 1989 won the very first national championship the school ever won. It was the first of, I don't know, more than a dozen, I think, for the volleyball team. And it also triggered a tremendous growth in WashU's Division III athletic stature, starting out with the women's sports primarily, and eventually moving on to men's sports such as basketball, football, etc. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Actually, and most recently, the girls' soccer team.
That's right. This year,
women's soccer team.
It's true.
Just won a national championship.
They just did. I'm very proud of that school. They're constantly, every year in the running for, I think it's called the Lear Trophy. It's the all sport trophy where they somehow assign a numeric value to every result in every sport. And we've never won it, but we were like second or third practically every year for the last 10 years or so. And my opinion is that WashU volleyball in the late 80s is what triggered that growth. So
yeah, Terry Clemens.
And,
when she recruited me, and I don't even think I had ever heard of Washington University to begin with, or at least the one in St. Louis. She had recruited a girl that was a year ahead of me that I played club ball with, Terry Hibner. And Terry was going. Then she actually did not go to WashU and went to Syracuse, like late of that spring before the fall. She was going to be a freshman. They offered her a full ride to Syracuse, which she took, and actually did amazing there. So it worked out great for her. But that's how I met Terry Clemens, was because she had been recruiting somebody a year ahead of me. And
when you say that's how you met her, did you meet her in person because she was at a game or a tournament scouting Terry?
Yeah, that was, that was pretty much the way that it was done. You still had a little bit that would come and see you in high school, but it was all about club ball, club tournaments. She coached a club. That's where Kathy played, Bursett. She was a high school coach at Incarnate Word in St. Louis, and then she coached a St. Louis club that was very good. Kathy played for her, and then so yeah, she was recruiting Terry, and then obviously when you're recruiting somebody, like recruiting, especially in Division III, you're always looking, well, not every division, you're looking at, the junior class, the sophomore class, the freshman class, who's coming up, and so yeah, I met her at a tournament and kept in touch. And again, I didn't think I was going to go to WashU, and then she had contacted me. I don't know. It just all worked out.
Well, so During that period of time, were you also being recruited by other schools? Were you being looked at by Division I programs, for example?
Yeah, I actually thought I was going to go to University of Rhode Island, and I really did not like the school, but I knew I would play there. Thought like Eastern came into the picture very late, just before WashU did, and that was closer to home, but really wasn't. I mean, I don't know. I didn't think I really wanted to go there either.
Was
So there were a
it
couple.
was it your thought that you really wanted to continue playing volleyball? Was that one of the primary concerns you had going into college?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a couple other programs, Division One, that I thought I could walk on to. I mean, I had talked to them that I knew I could walk on, but I also didn't know if I'd play much or how that
Right.
would work out. So it honestly, I am so happy that I did what I did. One of the things that she said when she was recruiting, I don't think, I mean, I think a lot of us was that, her plan was that before we graduated, we'd win a national championship. And we did. So
So your freshman year at Washington University was Coach Clemens' second year then as a head coach?
no, no. It was her third.
Okay,
So I think she came in the her first year. The second year was the year she recruited
gotcha.
Lori Nishikauer, Brooke Horton, Christy Rennie. I'll only call her ever Christy Rennie. She's been Christy Rennie forever. And that group, Carrie Fagan, they were all the year ahead of us. And God, they had an incredible record. They'd been ranked in the top 25 and then did not get a bid. They got shut out, which, quite frankly, I don't know. I mean, you know Coach Clemens, but not like I know Coach Clemens. That woman can hold a grudge. And so, I mean, she was going to obviously recruit a great class. I mean, trying to recruit another good class on top of it, no matter what. But that just like even made her more laser focused. The irony of it is the team that kept WashU out, that was on the selection committee, that voted no, was the coach at Ohio Northern, who is the team that we beat in the national championship.
Sweet, sweet revenge. Girls that you mentioned, Brooke, Lori, etc. Those the year they were shut out. Then was that their junior year at WashU?
No, that was their freshman year.
Oh,
Their
their
freshman
freshman
year,
year.
they
I
didn't receive
understand
a bid.
at all. I
Uh,
got you.
yeah. So my freshman year, we actually got a bid. Uh, we lost at Whitewater, so like in
Right.
the regional finals.
And for those of you who may wonder, when Dawn was a freshman at Washington University, I was a senior at Washington University. And although we knew each other, we did not go out or date, really, I mean, barely talk to each other during your first year in college. And she used to hang out with a lot of soccer players. It was kind of annoying.
And
But
basketball.
in basketball, right? Not football for some reason. I don't know why. But anyway, we actually started dating the year after I graduated, which was your junior year, I believe. No,
No,
that
my
can't be
sophomore
right.
year.
Sophomore year. So
Yeah.
we had been dating, and I was a spectator at the national championship games tournament, which the finals were held at WashU's campus. So I was there to see my future wife win the national championship, and it was one of the greatest sports events I've ever been to. There's only one other event that I've attended that was more amazing, more energy, just craziness. And my guess is you could just figure out which one it was because we were there together.
Well, I would think there's probably two. And the one I think you're thinking about was when we saw the Blackhawks win the Stanley Cup final in
That's the
Chicago.
answer right
I think
there.
the
That
other
was
one probably was when we saw the Bulls play in the NBA championship.
yeah. The difference being that the Hawks game we saw was Game 7, and
Yes.
we
Yeah.
literally saw them win it all.
Yes.
But
Hey, they didn't whip out the silly string like we did.
exactly. I will say that it is a very close race because that was one of the most amazing finishes. Just the pure. energy, I guess, is all I can say. Like you said, all of a sudden these cans of silly string came out from under your bench, and the whole gym was covered in it. There were huge piles of people everywhere. It was absolutely particularly from somebody who never played in any kind of championship game throughout my entire athletic career. It was one of the most amazing events, one of the most amazing experiences I ever had. It was really cool.
I do
It was
remember
really cool.
Diane and I taking off running, and we ran all the way around the gym spraying
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, and you played with a number of first team All Americans. You mentioned Lori Nishikawa, who may be the most impressive athlete in any sport I've ever seen play myself. And she's like 5 foot
100%.
nothing. But she was at least, I know was she a two-time player of the year? Am I correct? Three
Three-time
time.
player of the year. I think, I don't know. I'm gonna say Lori is 5'5", but she's not. I think she was like 5'3" or 5'4". If she ever hears this and I say the wrong height, she'll be mad at me forever.
Yeah, you may get, yeah, I don't know if she listens to the podcast, but I'm going to send her a link to this one just to see what her response is.
Yeah, and it's funny because I coached a lot of amazing athletes. I've played with a lot of amazing athletes. Girls that have been all Big Ten, NCAA Division I national champions. And overall, I think Lori is by far the best all-around athlete
Yeah.
that that I've definitely ever played with, or been around by far. I just remember
So
when I used to work the women's basketball games, and she was like, we were all working the women's basketball games because we all worked for the athletic complex. And I remember, I think the women's team started to get kind of pissed because Lori would during halftime stand at half court and make half court
yeah,
shots. And I
I
swear to God, she would always make like 4 out of 5. And people are like cheering on Lori and like the 100 fans that were there.
well, in my senior year, I also worked for the athletic department and was the statistician for the men's and the women's basketball game. So I watched Lori do that for actually for years, and that was one of the things that just made me realize just what a tremendous athletic talent she really was.
Do you remember that when she called us like randomly one time because she decided she was going to learn how to play hockey and she was
Yeah,
playing women's hockey and we went and saw her in up at Rocket Ice Arena in
in Bowling.
Bolingbrook
Yeah,
and she was
yeah,
good.
yeah. Of course she was. So tell me this. First of all, I think one of the secrets to winning a national championship is having that kind of talent, right? I mean, if you have a Lori Nishikawa, if you have a Brooke Horton, if you have a Diane Stitch, you have, athletic, and in most of their cases, tall people who are good at good at their job. But what else was there? What else do you think led to you guys breaking through that ceiling, which no one at our school had ever done before?
Well, and it's funny because we've talked about the first class with Lori and everybody. My class actually was honestly, Diane and Kathy were both uh, amazing athletes, and I think that coach was, I don't know how to say this, but she was very mentally tough,
Mhm.
and she would make sure you were either going to be mentally tough or you were going to crumble and quit. And she was very laser focused on what we needed to do and how we were going to get there. I think that she was also very good because when we would have recruits in, she would ask us about them, but she wanted a specific type of player, a specific type of person. And it's honestly, it's those people that just hate to lose,
Yeah.
always playing to win. Uh, Even if it's just, it's funny because I laugh about Jake because, it's getting to the bottom of the driveway first. He wants to
Right.
win. He wants to
Mhm.
beat everybody. And that's how I think we all were. Not just
And
beat the
you
person next to you, is always win.
and you feel like she was specifically looking for that kind of personality whenever she recruited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? And I think overall, it's funny because now with what I do and working with sales teams and stuff, culture is so important to me. And the people that I bring on the team and hiring, it's so important. And I really think a lot of that goes back to coach and the culture that she created and how that everybody, meshed together. Because, not everybody was type A personality because it's hard to have, you know,
Hmm.
12, 15, women, of course, that are all type A
Yeah.
personality to get along as well as we did. So there were some others that were not necessarily as type A as some of the others, but she just really did a great job on mashing everybody together that created just a great culture.
Let me ask you this question then, and I'm going to set aside the national championship game we just described, which probably would be your response. But if you set aside that moment, what would you say your favorite memory of playing volleyball at WashU was?
God, there's so many. There's so many. I think that and it was that year to make it to Final Four. We played up at in Minnesota at like I think it was St. Benedict or whatever, and they were good. We battled with them. They might have actually beat us that year at one point. I can't remember because I think it was that year we started off kind of rough that we won. But
Hmm.
I think winning in that gym, because it was a small gym, and it was packed. I mean, you think Washi was packed. This game was smaller, so there was probably half as many people. I think they probably had 1,500 people in there. But the court was literally like right into the bleachers, and
Hmm.
they were screaming, and that was a huge, huge win. I remember coach when we practiced, because we would practice obviously every single day, and we'd practice before the game, especially when we traveled get us in the gym. Somehow she got to be able to use the sound system, and I remember her
Uh,
just blasting the music. And we were practicing and having to deal with that. And I think that I definitely think that helped. But we were just on fire and hell bent, and there was nothing that was going to stop us to making it to Final Four. So I think that was probably one of my favorite. I also remember this chick afterwards coming to my Kathy Brissett while we were all stretching on the court after, and she was like, "Hey, nice sportsmanship, 12." Just laughing because I mean, I wouldn't say that we were. I don't know. We'd point at people.
yeah, I was just going to say I have very specific memories. First of all, you guys in your warm-ups and in your pre-game
Regiment.
regimen, ritual, whatever you do, you were very once you warmed up. I mean, warm-ups were warm-ups, and you guys would play music, and you'd be diving all over the court because you had specific drills that you ran in warm-ups. But when it came time to announce the team, it was the most militaristic thing I'd ever seen in my own experience with sports, and particularly at the Division III level. But I'd never seen it anywhere. I mean, they would announce each of your names. You would each take one step forward, and raise one hand, look to the coach, I guess. I don't know who it was you would look to,
No,
but
you'd look at the
everybody.
stands. You would put your hand up. I think we were supposed to look both ways, but you'd look in the crowd, and everybody'd clap 2 times,
I
and you would
swear it
step
was.
back.
Yeah, it was like watching the North Korean army pregame, and you all did it. And again, particularly after you and I started going out, but even before that, I knew the older girls. I mean, most of them were a year or two younger than me. But you run across each other at the athletic complex, like you said, everybody worked there, and I knew that they were all goofballs and just ordinary people. But when you guys got on the floor, it did look like those old videos of the Japanese volleyball team when they would train them. Remember when they were kicking everybody's ass back in like the
Yeah, in
70s and
China.
80s? China, yeah, excuse me, not Japan.
And it's funny, you were talking about Terry Clemens and the things, and I remember, like, at the time when she started coaching, Elmhurst up here had won like back-to-back national championships, and she had said that she was wanted to pattern us after them because she remembered them all walking into the gym and and this is what we did. Our bags had to be on our left shoulder when everybody had to walk in. We walked in the same way. Bags were on our left shoulder. When we called the ball, we all called it the same exact way. And it's funny, I think this is one of the things that got under people's skin so much, where we were so militant in some things, we also just had a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
we would go through some warm-ups where we're literally basically playing football with a volleyball, throwing passes and shit, and we're running around laughing our heads off. And then we'd get on the court, we'd start kind of our like ritual, and then get on the court and just kill people. And I know we used to rub teams the wrong way.
There's no question that they were both intimidated and irritated. You could see it on their faces when you
Oh,
guys would
yeah.
play. All right, so I'm going to turn our attention a little bit from the athletic side of things, and we talked a little bit about warm-ups. And I only know this because we've been married now for many years. I promised you some time ago that I would stop saying how many years, so I'm not going to say that. But let's just say we know each other pretty well. And I know that you can rattle off the warm-up songs from that time period when you were playing volleyball. Because I don't know who picked the songs. I feel like it was a team effort, but I know you were involved in it.
So, it's funny. So my freshman year, Lori picked up most of them. And then for some reason, my sophomore year, I kind of took over and I didn't make a ton of changes. We didn't make a ton of changes from that year on. And it was funny because so we had to be on the court warming up, like stretching. We had to be stretching 1 hour before the match time. We stretched and then we ran, and it was just, certain things that we did at certain times. And like, so we started off with some kind of like slower songs or whatever, and it was Tainted Love. Tainted Love was the first song. And but this it just went on from there. And the second song though was Erotic City
From Prince, you mean?
from Prince.
Oh my God.
Fuck so pretty,
Yeah.
Erotic City, come alive. And I think it was, I don't know if it was, so this song was on our warm-up tape all 4 years. Yes,
Oh,
the
okay.
tape. And
Yeah, that's right.
what I
Cassette.
didn't realize until I think it was my senior year, uh, we were downstairs, like obviously we had started playing music, we were down there stretching, and I don't know if something was in Joe's office or what, but I had to run upstairs into the athletic offices. And that was when I found out that, and because I mean, sometimes our matches would start at like 4:30, 5 o'clock. So
Mhm.
mainly, people would be in the office. Mainly the one I was worried about after I figured this out was Josephine, who was like a 75-year-old woman. And I'm running through the hallway up there to grab something out of somebody's office. And lo and behold, I can hear Erotic City blaring through the athletic offices. And John Shale is in there,
Um,
Phil Godfrey, but mainly Josephine just sitting there. And I'm like, oh my God.
yeah, she looked like an old school marm, is what she
I
did.
know. She was the sweetest and the most
She
awesome
was.
woman.
Well, by that time they probably were used to it, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they were. So much that I never took it off.
So what else? We had Tainted Love, which I believe was Soft Cell, if I'm
With
not
Soft
mistaken.
Cell, Erotic City was
Erotic City.
Prince. The other one that I always remember that we kept on every single year, I mean, these are three songs that were always on there, was Brick House.
By the
And
Commodores.
yes, and I always think of Christy Rennie when I
That's funny. That's
hear that
great.
song. But yeah, that was I know, and I'd added some Prince on there and definitely some Violent Femmes we had on there. Those were like the three mainstays that were never going away.
Well, and I definitely remember being there early when you guys were warming up, and it's just what you said. I mean, it was you guys were all goofing off at that point. It felt like, I mean, you were running drills, and it was very obvious that the drills you were running had been drilled into your head. You knew exactly where to be. But I'd see, one of the people that you mentioned in passing was Kathy White, excuse me, who was also a National Player of the Year, I believe, her senior year.
hmm
Another tremendous talent, but from the outside, what I would see is just how tight you guys were and how close you were. I mean, by the
hmm
time you were a senior, you guys were all living together in either a suite or an apartment or what have you, and you practically finished each other's sentences by the time you graduated from college. But I will tell you, and I said it at the outset, we felt we started a brand new conference my senior year. You started playing it, as a freshman. That had a lot to do, I think, with WashU's eventual athletic success and they're moving up, in people's estimation. But nothing did it as much as winning that first championship. It was really cool.
Well, it's funny. It's actually a really good volleyball conference now. I mean,
Yeah, Yeah.
when Coach was right when she did this is they wanted everybody traveling from school to school, and she convinced them because those were not going to be good weekends for us.
Right.
She convinced them to do a round robin and then and they're a little bit different now how they do it, but then we would do like a round robin at a school, and then there would be like the conference championships at another
Right.
school. Uh, like in the round robin would seed everybody for later, and yeah, I still remember we played somebody and they underhand served, and we were like, what the fuck?
Well, and that, that's the thing is that conference, the University Athletic Association, which I've talked a little bit about in an earlier podcast. I mean, you guys got to play in a conference that had you traveling more than maybe most Division One schools at that time, except for the very top of the heap in D1, because those schools were in Atlanta, they were in New York, they were in Boston, Chicago. It was real. I can remember, even though the football team didn't really play a lot of those teams because, well, some of them didn't even have teams, but we didn't travel the same way. But just watching as that developed, as the conference developed, and as the teams, particularly volleyball and basketball, got to travel all over the country to play in these, kind of high-profile tournaments, high-profile games, it really made a big difference. And it was,
Yeah, and and Coach was really good on having us go where the competition was good. Like we always played in a tournament in Chicago, because obviously, volleyball out of here. And she just it's so funny because she just loved the refs in Chicago because the refs in Chicago were so much better than anywhere else. Uh, which was funny because they were all people that I like grew up. They were all my officials, and then when I started coaching, that became good friends with. But like she'd take us to California.
yeah.
I think we only went to California once. But yeah, like she would
Lots of
take
the
us
East
all over
Coast
the
trips,
place.
though,
Yeah,
because so many schools were actually on the East Coast.
yeah,
Yeah, it was. It definitely brought some prestige and certainly some respect, and I think, at least from your perspective, just a lot of pride in getting to play in a
yeah.
conference like that and succeed the way you guys succeeded.
You were talking about the national championship earlier. You're like, well, maybe that's what we'll talk about. And I actually started thinking about that whole like the Final Four and how my junior, like difference between junior and senior year. Yes, we lost my senior year in the finals.
I
Uh,
wasn't gonna bring it up.
I know you weren't. I know you weren't. And quite honestly, that game was epic, and it was
Yeah, it's
like
amazing.
over 2.5 hours long, that whole match. That's before it was all rally scoring. And it still stings, but there were just
I
so many
know.
good things, that happened and bad things that had like Diane Stites, who was All American, I think every year. I
Was
don't know
she?
if she was
I
All
was going to
American
ask you that
freshman year. She might
question.
have been honorable mention freshman year, but I mean, Diane was definitely first team All American. I want to say at least two, I think 3 years. I should
Yeah,
know this. I feel bad that I don't. Even my sophomore year, like Joni Subar came and Kelly Meyer came and Lisa Becker. It's much easier to
yeah,
recruit when you've got success, but every single time everybody added to the team. But Diane, it's funny because she was like me. We'd be walking on flat ground and we both roll our ankle but keep going. But Diane got hurt in that game, and Diane like made it through a entire college career without a really bad injury, and it was so hard to see her go down in that game.
yeah.
And just because we talk about with the boys that you might never know when your last game is.
Right.
Well, I knew when my last game was. You know,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that this was the last game. This was the last game ever. This was the last game we would ever be playing together. And you were either going to be first in the nation or second in the nation. But that was really hard and I'm sure that definitely had some factors. Although Mace did amazing after in her
Well,
spot.
it's like you said, Division three, particularly, success obviously breeds success. It's much easier to recoup, but I think, particularly at that time in Division three sports, if you were successful, it was a huge boon to recruiting.
Yeah.
Because what you saw, you ended at the Division three level, particularly in the 80s and 90s, you saw a lot of what's the word I'm thinking of, dynasties. You saw it in football, you saw it in basketball. You would see back to back to back to back sometimes national championships at the Division III level, and that's because without athletic scholarships, the best way to recruit is to say, hey, look, you're going to get to play in these games, and that's definitely what Coach brought to that program and that you guys built. Particularly, like I said, you win a national championship, and you're just going to build on that all the way through. And I mean, you guys were in the finals, I think 6 or 7 years in a row, starting with your national championship. I looked it up at one point, and
Well, I remember Kelly had 3 rings, and the one that she didn't have a ring on was her middle finger because she said that was the year that we fucked it up. And that so that was her
another player of the year, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
know, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that whole match, it's just and it's
Yeah,
funny
it's tough.
because they had locked down the building and people were breaking into the building
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get in to see us. So that was
that's
pretty
amazing.
cool. Definitely different than well, and that's it. We played UCSD. They were just so much deeper than we were. Again, when you're playing for over 2.5 hours, it was kind of rough.
Yeah.
Much different than the year before, the year that we won. Like the big game that year was our semifinal when we played Juniata. They were by far better. And then in the national finals, we play Ohio Northern, spanked them in 3 games.
Yeah, it was
I'm
a
not even
sweep.
sure like they got to 20 points in any of the games.
Yeah, you intimidated them from the outset. There was no
Well,
question.
also, and then it was very frustrating because like we played some really good teams along the way, and all I could think of is how the fuck are we playing you? Because you wanted to win, obviously, but you
Yeah.
wanted it to be like a great game. And I mean we had it in the semifinals, but
Well, plus, like you said, my guess is Coach got a lot of pleasure out of beating that particular team in that
oh
particular
yeah.
game. That's
Oh,
pretty awesome.
definitely. Definitely. It meant so much to like our seniors because they all hated that woman too
Yeah.
because she kept
Right,
them out
sure.
their freshman year.
Of course.
Ironically, also the semifinal game. So that whole weekend of Final Four, the year we won. So my mom came down and had appendicitis. Do you remember that?
I'm aware, yes. I'm aware because she also had a 1 year old. How old was Katie? Your
Yeah,
your
Katie
sister?
was just a little over a year, so she was like 16 months.
So you and
And
I got to
so
stay in a
Danny
hotel
was like
room?
3, and
Yeah.
we had to spend the night with those two. And I did not sleep at all. Coach still said I had to come to practice and come to our luncheon, but all I wanted to do was just try to get like a couple hours of sleep. And then our semifinal game, I don't know if this is normally what people do in a Final Four, but it was Kathy Brissett's 21st birthday. And I had always said that I was going to get a stripper for her 21st birthday. And then when we started figuring out, and I had already found a guy and blah, blah, blah. And then when we were like, holy shit, it's matching up with the first night. So we got the stripper, and I had to go tell coach. Like we had to tell coach, and of course, because we're poor college students, so I spent all my money on a stripper. Didn't have enough money to buy the guy a ticket to get in. So because it was all locked down by the NCAA, I had to ask to like let this guy in. So I had to tell coach that it was a stripper for Kathy's birthday. So she was like, "Oh my God!" And of course, it had to be me telling her,
Of course.
because if anybody was gonna fuck something up, it was gonna be me. And so she was like, "Oh my God!" She's like, "This could be the absolute best thing for you guys, like
Uh,
totally take away all of the jitters and everything, or literally could be the worst thing." And I was like, "It'll be a good thing." So we had the stripper. Coach was in the locker room for like maybe a hot second. He looked at her and she like zipped right out. But
that's funny.
so yeah, so we had a stripper beforehand, and then somehow Shale found out. So
Shale was the athletic director.
yeah, so she's sitting up like way up in the stands watching the game before us. And Shale comes up and sits there and asks her, like, "Oh, did you know about this?" She's like, "Oh, yep." "You're okay with this?" "Yep."
That's funny. That's really funny. All right, we have to get to our segments, man. You've just proven that you need to be a return guest on this show because there's more to talk about. But
I think Other than marrying you, I think that was
Uh,
the most eventful things that have ever happened in my life.
well, that certainly was that was a cool, very cool period of time. Very cool period of time. Let us move on to post facto.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
I need to make one correction from last week's episode. Chris and I were, during our Aggies Award episode, we were talking about our favorite musical releases. I mentioned that Todd Snider has been putting out all year albums, re-recorded albums of work that he had done in the past. And in that segment, I talked about his all of those albums and said that Viva Satellite was the very first album that he had issued way back when. Actually, that's not true. Todd Snider's first album was Songs for the Daily Planet, which came out in 1994. Then he recorded Step Right Up in 1996. Both of those were on Margaritaville Records. Then he released Viva Satellite, which I thought was the first one, but was in fact his third album. That came out in 1998 on MCA Records. Todd Snider's released 26 albums, not including the Purple Building albums that I recommended last week. So he just put out a new Purple Building album last Friday. So he's now up to 11 of those. And I still recommend them, but I wanted to correct my mistake. Chris has no corrections. Chris never has any corrections. He's literally not here to make any corrections, even if he did fuck something up. So that is it for post facto this week. The other thing we've been trying to do this season is make recommendations for unknown unknowns. It's my turn. We alternate this. And my unknown unknown to recommend to all of you to listen to is a band called Mulehead. They've got 3 or 4 albums out. Nobody's ever heard of them. I particularly love the album Rocket Surgery, which came out in 2007. My favorite song on that album is called Ordinary Day. I recommend it highly. This band they sound very much like the Bottle Rockets or the V-Roys, kind of an alt country type of sound. They have a lot more output than I realized. Like I said, they have more albums than I knew, but they still have a really low profile on any of the streaming services you look at. I looked them up on YouTube Music. They have 42 followers. They have 222 followers on Spotify. On Amazon, I looked them up, and all it said was, be one of the first to follow. So if you get a chance, try to find Mulehead. They're out there on Spotify. They're out there on iTunes. Look for the song Ordinary Day if you're going to listen to only one song. But that is my unknown unknown for this finale episode of season 5. Look for the band Mulehead. Another thing we've been doing differently for season 5 is making recommendations from specific years. We started with the 80s, and as this is the 10th episode of season 5, we are now up to our 1990 recommendation. Chris has recommended an album that came out in 1990 that's very near and dear to my heart as well. It's the album No Depression by Uncle Tupelo. Many people consider this kind of the beginning of the alt-country movement, particularly in the Midwest anyway. And Chris is recommending that you listen to that one as soon as you can. I'm going to recommend a film from 1990 from a pair of directors that everybody knows is probably one of my favorites. The Coen brothers put out a movie called Miller's Crossing. I think it's an underappreciated Coen brothers movie starring Gabriel Byrne, John Turturro, Marcia Gay Harden is in it. It's kind of a gangster flick, but it's got what you can only call the Coen brothers twist to it. And that came out in 1990, and I would say go watch that as soon as you can. Which brings us to our staff picks.
Randall, just around the corner from you.
We like to make a recommendation of something that's either just coming out or came out in the recent past that people might not have heard of or did not realize was coming out. So I'm going to ask you, our honored guest, do you have anything you want to recommend as a staff pick for this episode?
Well, actually, season 2 of Severance is going to be out any day. So I would say if anybody hasn't watched season 1, you've got like a couple weeks. It is, well, for me, it was pretty quick. I have a tendency to binge things.
And you've been doing nothing but talking about Severance for the last 2 weeks. So
I know. Now that they keep seeing the trailers, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait. So yeah, definitely Severance. If you haven't seen season 1, watch it. because season 2 is right around the corner. So that is definitely my recommendation.
Yeah, it's really hard to describe what that show is if you haven't seen it, and even if you have seen it, because it's not a comedy, although it's funny. It's it's not a thriller, but it kind of is.
Hmm.
It's got a great cast. Adam Scott is the lead in that show. Is I love that. In fact, oddly enough, John Turturro is in that show too from
Yeah.
from Miller's Crossing. Patricia Arquette is in it. It's got a great supporting cast of actors that I'm not as familiar with. I loved season 1 as well. In fact, I think I may have been the one to say, I think I watched a couple episodes before I realized that you would like it. And then you had to catch up. And then you, I think, passed me on one weekend and watched everything. But that streams on Apple TV Plus. And do you remember the date that it's coming out? Because I don't.
I don't. It's January. I want to say it's like January 24th or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right.
If I had something that I could have like in my hand where I could find out like all that information
Well, yeah,
quickly, that would
maybe
be so
someday.
cool.
Maybe
Um,
someday. While you're looking for that type of device, I will tell you that Chris is recommending a novel called Leviathan. The author is Robert McCammon. This is part of a series I know Chris has talked about in the past. It's kind of a sci-fi fantasy thing. The main character is a Matthew Corbett. Chris recommended the earlier books in the series. I still haven't gotten around to reading them, but I think that literally just came out last week, and he's already started reading it, and he's really excited to finish that.
awesome. Severance season 2 starts January 17th, which by the
Yeah.
way, that just makes me giddy because I thought it was the 24th, so it's 7 days sooner.
You got one more less week that you have to sit and wait.
Woo-hoo!
I'm also, as a staff pick, making a recommendation of a fantasy novel. This one is a YA fantasy novel, and this is what we like to call synergy because the book was written by a future guest of the show. His name is Rob King. This book came out on November 19th of 2024, for Monarchs Publishing, and the book is called The Door in the Stone. It is a YA book. I read it because Rob happens to be a friend of mine, and I saw a press release saying that this book was coming out. It's his first novel. He also happens to be the voice of the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is, I think, why he got a little bit of press about writing a fantasy novel, not usually what you hear sports broadcasters doing. But I read the book, and it is really, really good. I can't wait to tell him how much I enjoyed it, despite the fact it is a YA thing. It's really riveting. The characters are really interesting, and he goes into a lot of depth. By the end of the book, you really feel like you know these characters. Some things feel a little, fantasy novel cliche, but he twists everything around a little bit, and the relationships between the different characters really make a difference. It was a lot of fun, and I really, really am looking forward to seeing what happens in the second book. So I'm recommending The Door in the Stone by Rob King, published by For Monarchs. And then finally, in every episode of Third Song In, Chris and I each recommend a song to go on our playlist. Our playlist is called Third Song In Season 5, and we try to pick songs that kind of coincide with the theme of the episode. Doesn't always work. I think in this particular occasion it does. My pick for the playlist, and these will be the last songs on the playlist before we start season 6. I'm choosing a song recorded by Barnes Courtney from the album The Attractions of Youth, which came out in 2017. And the title of the song is Champion. What is really funny is, although Chris is not here to record, he texted me at the last minute with his song choice for the playlist, and he picked the song Champion by Barnes Courtney from The Attractions of Youth. And I texted him back and said, hey, you're not here, motherfucker. You got to pick a new song.
By the way, now I can say that, does Chris actually hate me? Is that why he's not here today?
No, I tell you guys can be intimidating, you volleyball players. I think he's just intimidated. So he came up very quickly with a new song or a different song, and he chose the song Champion by Kanye West from Graduation, the album Graduation in 2007. And I love that album. I actually can't quite remember that song, so he said, hey, I think it works. He says, if it's inappropriate, you can delete it, but it's too late now. That's the one we're picking. So we are finishing with back-to-back champions on our playlist for season 5. However, before those final two songs, on the third to last spot, we would like to give our honored guest an opportunity to add to the season 5 playlist. Do you have something you'd like to add to third song in season 5?
I do, which is not a typical song that you would think for me. I know you said something like, 1990, and I listened to this song ad nauseum, 1990. This was the song that I listened to before I got on the court in my headphones. And again, I don't know if you remember the whole second half of my season, my senior year. I had 3 stress fractures in my back. My ankles were really bad, so I was in the training room for an hour before I got on the court with the hot packs and the muscle stim and getting taped and all that shit. And I listened to Paradise City by Guns N' Roses over and over and over. And that was my song. And by the end of the season, like football was over, it was just us and basketball because basketball was starting. And I remember one day, because of course you can't hear yourself singing in the headphones, and I am not a great
Oh,
singer, and I was like singing that song very loudly, and Susan the trainer came over one day and just grabbed my Walkman, dates me, opens it up, and she goes and puts it in the tape player to play in the entire training room, and she's like, "There, stop singing."
that's awesome. That's
I think
really good.
Rob Rickett was like, "Finally."
I thought for a second you were going to say that she grabbed the tape and threw it into the whirlpool.
Yeah, no doubt.
All
I,
right, so
I, I think
those
I,
are
I think I would have like literally died at that moment and not been able to play that tape she had.
our three songs for our season 5 playlist to finish up our season 5 playlist. As I said before, you can find those playlists streaming wherever you listen to music: Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, YouTube Music. Keep your eye out. We will be starting a new playlist with our new season. Speaking of which, a little preview of next season. As I said, this is our final episode of season 5. We'll take a short break to get ourselves organized and figure some stuff out. But we're really excited. We've already got a couple guests booked, people that are interested in talking to us. One of them I already mentioned is Rob King, who, as of for the 2024 season, became the voice of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is their radio play-by-play announcer. He took over for a gentleman who had been doing it for, I think, 16 or 17 years. It's really impressive. Rob is he's an interesting guy. I played football with him. We kind of crossed at Washington University. Just about a year, I think, was it. So I didn't get to know him real well, but I know he's a really nice guy. He was actually very successful on the football team as a quarterback his
Yep.
senior year. And then he got into sports broadcasting and has been in the Pittsburgh area for quite some time. And turns out, also a fantasy novelist. So I think we have a lot to talk to with Rob. We also have another guest definitely booked, a gentleman named Brent Moats. He's from here in the Joliet area. He's been the lead man in a number of bands over the last 20 or 30 years. He is currently a singer and guitarist, songwriter for a band called the Righteous Hillbillies, who perform in and around Joliet and Central Illinois all the time. A really talented guy. I'm very much looking forward to talking to him about the local music scene. And we've got a couple other guests that we are hoping to get on. I'm not going to, jinx it by mentioning their names without, getting them to agree on a specific date. But anyway, season 6 should premiere on January 20, 2025. That's our plan. Our first episode should drop on that date. And in the meantime, you can continue to get information about the podcast at thirdsonginpodcast.com, which has all of our links, all of our information. As I said, also look on the website for our blog. You can find articles about music, movies, TV, sometimes just stuff we were thinking about when we went out on a run. So usually I ask my guests if they have anything they want to plug. I'm not sure there's anything specific in terms of a book or a song or an album, but anything you would like to say before we sign off for the episode?
Well, I can always plug Patron. Always has been, always will be, additive-free tequila.
Nice. Third Song In is recorded in Joliet, Illinois. You can email us at thirdsongin@gmail.com. You can also, as I said, find us at thirdsonginpodcast.com, where you can find separate pages for our episode spotlight, our blog. You can find all of the recommendations, all of the things we've talked about in this episode and earlier episodes are organized in or on the website. Please follow us, rate and review the podcast anywhere you listen to it. Download it. All those things help us a lot. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, YouTube Music. Look for companion playlists, as I said before, both for the entire season and for our special guests. We have a Facebook page. You can follow us and communicate with us there as well. You can look there for links to our, as mentioned, pages and learn about our guests. And also, as I said, email or try to contact us. You've been listening to Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polacek. Thanks for listening. We do some music reviews. We do some navel gazing. It's all in good fun. That was fucking horrible. That was just fucking horrible. As poorly as I feel like I speak when Chris is with me, it is so much worse when I'm by myself.